welcome to Workforce Wisdom. I'm your host, Christy Bray, Chief Strategy Officer at PracticeLink. This podcast focuses on the latest trends in healthcare recruitment while showcasing innovative strategies, success stories, and fresh perspectives affecting the healthcare workforce. These episodes will lead to in-depth, thoughtful discussions with recognized industry-leading healthcare professionals exploring the challenges of healthcare recruitment and beyond. Whether you're an experienced recruitment professional or just starting out, this podcast aims to help you discover how experts are reshaping the industry, leveraging technology, and fostering inclusive hiring practices. Today's episode, Workforce Wisdom with Bruce Robinson on leadership, industry evolution, and career growth. I'm pleased to welcome Bruce.
Great to meet you, Christy.
Thanks. Bruce Robinson is a seasoned recruitment professional with over 18 years of experience attracting and retaining top physicians and surgeons. With a background in advertising, public relations, and market research, he is key in helping Mercyhealth strengthen its workforce and brand. Bruce excels in workshop facilitation, creative ideation, and mentoring, fostering relationships, and enhancing organizational culture. Beyond his recruitment work, Bruce founded Sparrow, a coaching company dedicated to helping individuals navigate their careers. As an executive coach for 15 years, he is passionate about guiding others in discovering their purpose, potential, and impact. He holds a Master's of Divinity from Covenant Theological Seminary and a Bachelor's of Arts in Biblical Studies from Bob Jones University. Welcome again, Bruce.
Great to meet you, Christy.
Well, we're going to get started and just jump right in and talk a little bit about, early career and what inspired you. So can you share with the listeners what initially drew you to the provider recruitment or the talent recruitment field and any key experiences that shaped you early in your career?
I can't say that I initially sought out physician recruitment. I had been in a lot of relationship building, particularly with the IBM Credit Union, building relationships there. Also with PricewaterhouseCoopers, building relationships there. I could go on forever about all the benefits that I accrued through both of those companies and others. I spent a little while working for a specialty contact lens laboratory where we developed and manufactured specialty contact lenses. So there I really got my first entry into talking with physicians because part of my job was talking with ophthalmologists every day. So I saw an opportunity in early 2000 about jumping into physician recruitment. I interviewed for a position. They told me with my background of relationship building that I would be well suited to jump into physician recruitment. So that's what brought me into this space. And I've enjoyed it over the 18 years I've been involved.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting. There is no recruiter school. So we all have pretty diverse backgrounds into how we got into the seats that we're in today. And I would say relationships is probably the theme we'll keep talking about as we go through today. With that extensive experience, were there some pivotal moments in your professional journey, especially as we look to provide examples and insights to those just starting out in the field?
I began back in the day. I joke with people who were younger than I began when people were worried about Y2K and what was going to happen back in the day when Yahoo was the number one search engine. But I had the real benefit and luxury when I jumped into physician recruitment of, I guess you would say, a long period of training. I talk with physician recruiters today and they begin, say, yesterday on Monday. And within a couple of days, they're already recruiting and they may or may not understand all of the details about physician recruitment. I had the luxury when I began being in a classroom setting and kind of doing an 8 to 5 over many, many weeks. In fact, it was a few months. We had testing every day. We had quizzes. We had role playing. A little bit of video, but it was mainly audio. So our peers and our leadership critiqued us every day. So very, very different than today where you click on a couple of webinars and you're jumping into the physician recruitment space. So I had that luxury And it served me well. It gave me a really good knowledge base.
Are there other courses or things along the way that you have done to just maintain that knowledge and continue to grow?
Well, I'm very curious, very intellectually curious. So, of course, I'm a member of AAPR, and it goes back to the old ASPR days. But a lot of industry webinars, learnings, I think probably more than anything else, my own personal reading and study, that has helped me more than anything else. Maybe some seminal things. I'm a lot different than many physician recruiters in that I draw a lot of inspiration and guidance from the tech industry. For instance, Apple Computer has been a real source of inspiration and guidance for me. Learning how Apple was built, how it rose so quickly, and then almost collapsed after the departure of Steve Jobs. But if you look on my bookshelf, you'll see a lot of different books, and I have a really wide interest in many, many subjects. So with me, it's kind of like cooking in a slow cooker. Everything goes in there, and I turn up the heat, and we'll see what pops out. But I think that, especially today, I don't think you can just focus on physician recruitment webinars, because your candidate base today is very, very different. And we can touch on that a little bit later, but many of them have been in the scientific or technological space. So you have to talk a little bit of that language. Apple, Google, a lot of Silicon Valley, that kind of stuff informs a lot of my thinking. So I'm a little bit different than your usual physician recruiter who just only reads what's in his or her industry.
And I think the benefit to reaching outside of that industry, really learning probably a lot of entrepreneurial lessons, especially from Apple and those types of companies in Silicon Valley. How do you take that? And I want to ask you, you can think about it for a minute, but top one or two books on your shelf that you would recommend to folks? I know I have a ton of books that are on my bookshelves that I look at every day that I've read, but top one or two books. And then how would you help folks expand outside of their industry? And it could be something like ACHE, or I know a lot of AAPPR members also are MGMA members. Are there other organizations like that you might recommend?
No organizations come to mind immediately. A good example of a book that's helped me a lot is called Insanely Simple. And it's the story basically of how Apple began and how everything had to be reduced to its simplest essence, and making things very, very simple and clear. Steve Jobs was very committed to that, along with making things, of course, very visually beautiful. I mean, the rounded corners, the colors, the boxing, everything in Apple is geared to not just making it materially superior, but also even visually superior. So that book, Insanely Simple, has been really, really helpful to me. And learning to think in simplest terms. The whole approaches today of, say, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, first principle thinking and breaking down a problem into very, very small rudimentary parts. That's also very helpful. You learn from both of those individuals. I can't really vouch for Mark Zuckerberg, even though he's a big player, or maybe Tim Cook, but particularly Bezos and Musk. Both of them are very much problem solvers, looking to break a problem down into the very, very basics and how things connect. So I try to apply that to my physician recruitment as well.
I'm sure there have been some challenges along the way. Were you able to use that type of methodology to help you overcome them and maybe navigate through some of those challenges?
Yes, I have, particularly the Insanely Simple book. Another really great book as an executive coach. This is also a really great book for people. It's called $1 Trillion Coach. And it's the story of a coach who literally was a college football coach at Columbia in New York. and he was in advertising. He moved out to the Silicon Valley, and the dirty little secret is that he was the executive coach to Steve Jobs, to Eric Schmidt, to others in Silicon Valley, and many people, I think maybe the founder of Netscape as well. Many people did not know about him till after he died. And they call him the $1 trillion coach because he was behind the founding of Oracle. He was behind the founding of Apple, behind the founding of Google. And he was the individual personal coach of all of these CEOs, but no one knew about him. And he didn't go to a quote-unquote coaching school, but he was a football coach, a college football coach, and went out there and started meeting people. That's a really great book as well, particularly in mentoring and leading teams, called $1 Trillion Coach. It came out a few years ago. I really commend that book as well.
No, thanks for those recommendations. I was writing them down. I have not read either of those, so thanks for that.
Yeah, the insanely simple. Once you read it, then you pick up, if you have an iPhone or you have a Mac, you're like, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense. But everything was to be reduced to its very, and if it wasn't simple, they erased the board and began again. And I think that applies to physician recruitment. Let's say you have an offer, and if a candidate doesn't understand the offer, if it's heavily legalese, they can't understand it, and they get an offer that's really clear and simple, they may gravitate to the clear and simple rather than the heavily legalistic.
Yeah, I hope most recruiters listening, I mean, gone are the days of like the 20, 30-page employment contracts. I hope most organizations are beyond that because it's too much. And most of us, when I was in-house recruiting, you're working off of a standard template format. So you're not looking for them to pay a lawyer to redline this agreement. What you want is protections for both you, the health system, and then what's expected from the candidate. I agree. And I think some of the best cases that I worked in, we had set standard comp based on specialty and region, and the recruiter was empowered to better communicate that throughout the recruitment process. So when you did get to, here's your offer, here's your contract, nothing was a surprise. You've been talking about it all along the way. So during your time, and you referenced earlier recruitment methods, and we've recently been recording a video for PracticeLink where it goes back to dot matrix printers and these little discs you used to have in computers. And I told the team, I said, this won't resonate with every generation. I remember taking a typewriter to college because we did not have all these computers. So anyway, as everything keeps evolving, has there been some change or two that you could put your fingerprint on to say this has had a really, really significant impact? Or what do you see coming? Might be AI, something like that you really think might revolutionize our industry?
I think that's probably a both and question. If you know me very much, I use that scheme a lot rather than an either or. I'm a both and person. But I think the physician recruitment platforms like a PracticeLink, Practice Match, Doximity, LinkedIn Recruiter, I've used all of those, and you kind of have to use all of those tools at once because one alone will not do the job. It's kind of like maybe a chef using all different types of knives. You need different tools for different things, but that's been very, very helpful. Particularly the two platforms that we use a lot, PracticeLink and Practice Match. Both of those are very, very helpful because it does so many things that we would have to do if they did not do it, if the platform itself. I began back in the day first with Practice Match when they were literally called MedTies. They used to do a lot of direct mailing for us. And I tell people that, and they look at me like, what are you talking about, direct mailing? And I said, if you click on the MedTies tab, it gives you a list of physicians. We used to do a lot of direct mailing. But those two platforms particularly, I think, are very helpful, and they've been really useful. That again, they do so many things. And with the advent of AI on both of those platforms, I see AI being used I really appreciate the focus groups that Practice Match has. I appreciate how PracticeLink, there's so many great follow-ups. Both of the platforms, are really great as far as customer or client support. I mean, I could call PracticeLink every day and they would help me do whatever I needed to do. Kind of the same thing with Practice Match. So I think both of those platforms have been really useful over the last 20 years, since maybe 2002, 3, 4, when they first began. As far as AI goes, I was a real early adopter of ChatGPT. I used ChatGPT, a little bit of Claude, a little bit of Monica. I've really not tried Pilot yet with Outlook, since I'm very much all things Apple. I'm a little bit allergic sometimes to Microsoft, so I don't always use a lot of tools with Microsoft, or maybe don't care to. They seem to be so behind the times when it comes to certain things. No offense to those who really love Microsoft, but I think AI is going to play a really big role. I get a ton of stuff about AI in my personal accounts, in my executive coaching accounts, and also in the physician recruiter accounts as well. I mean, I've probably gotten 6 emails just today on AI and different products and applications. My guess is there's probably at least 10 to 20,000 apps already with AI, at least, that can help you do anything. People think of, maybe writing a job description for a physician, but there's so very, very basic. There's so many things that AI can do. If you're still using spreadsheets, and this is a real prickly subject for me because I'm very committed to process improvement, and there's still a lot of physician recruiters who are using spreadsheets. And as my son, who's an entrepreneur, said, the only people who are still using spreadsheets are financial institutions and healthcare. And we use some here, but AI is literally going to put the death to spreadsheets. Same thing with PowerPoint. AI has pretty much already canceled PowerPoint in many ways. And to hark back to an earlier comment, I love how both Jeff Bezos and, well, maybe not SpaceX, but Tesla, they've both banned PowerPoint. You can't use PowerPoint in either of those companies. They give you a 6 to 8 page typed memo, and they ask you to read it, but they know that you will not. This is especially the case in Amazon. So you have a meeting and they give you 15 or 20 minutes to read the memo, and then you hash through the written memo rather than showing you a lot of PowerPoints. So that's another great thing about AI, is it's always looking for process improvement. It's not going to replace a lot of the relationship building things that I referenced early on, but it will be another tool. Rather than a standing mixer, it will be an immersive mixer or whatever. It's going to be a tool that people will use. I don't think it's going to actually replace physician recruiters. However, I think what it will do, your successful physician recruiters will be using AI. And if you don't, it will be like someone who doesn't use the internet. The internet did not replace a physical physician recruiter. However, you have to be able to use the internet today. Same thing with AI. You're going to have to be able to use those tools. And if not, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the way that we use it day to day at PracticeLink, and really it's just a tool, like you said, making sure you have the resource and tools you need in your toolbox. I always advise people reread what it is or change it to your tone. Some people bounce between, you mentioned several different AI platforms. I've tried Gemini. That was one that was recommended. I didn't love it as much, so I kind of stick to ChatGPT, but I also like Grammarly to provide some solutions. And I think one of the things that several of my guests that I've had that we talk about is definitely proofread it so it sounds like it's coming from a human, but equally you can train your AI to either write in your voice or change some of those pieces. Like, it's always learning. And so I think that's a key. If you do start to use it to write job descriptions, maybe you want write this job description for better SEO so you get more traffic. It's got those keywords in there that Google and the other sites are looking for. So those are great examples on that. What would you say is a particularly proud moment in your career, either a project or achievement? I know that I've had several throughout my career leading teams, but anything that stands out to you, and then the impact it had maybe to the community, your health system, personally?
I've had many of those things over the years. I would say one thing that's been fairly recent, I think you and I talked a little bit beforehand about my living in North Dakota, and even my previous position as well to that one. But I came to North Dakota to a facility where they had undergone a tremendous amount of change. They had fallen into some financially difficult times. They had an unwelcome acquisition. They had lost a lot of physicians. When I came there, I recruited several physicians in a very short period of time. Of course, they were using a tremendous amount of locum tenens. And as my leader told me, she said, it really doesn't matter where you begin, Bruce. It doesn't matter which specialty, because we're spending millions on locums, so you can almost go anywhere you want and it will be great. And I was able to stop the bleeding there with locum tenens in a very short period of time. I'd say the biggest thing that I spent a lot of time on was rebuilding the brand. That's another part of me that we can get into here or maybe a subsequent call, but people often confuse brand with logo, and that's not necessarily the case. But I contend that you attract physicians and retain physicians through your brand. But I did a lot of branding there at that hospital in North Dakota. I love those people there. It was a really, really old hospital, an old Catholic facility, and walking in there from like the 1880s, we were even prior to Mayo Clinic. So going there every day was kind of like working in a cathedral. But I did a lot of brand rebuilding there and would probably still be there had COVID not came along.
So tell us a little bit more about that, because I'm sure several of the folks listening, I know what my in-house team did during COVID, and it did allow for us in a way to prove that we could work from anywhere, is what I like to say. Obviously, they were in home offices, but work from anywhere, which is what recruiters do anyway. We're kind of on call 24/7. But so tell me a little bit about what precipitated that. Was there a change in office? Was it financial stress? What was it then that COVID precipitated that move for you to Mercy?
It was more financially related than anything else. We went through a few CFOs there in just a few years. Often, as a physician recruiter, if you have any experience, it's almost like maybe being someone in the military and you're going to a hot spot somewhere geopolitically to settle this down or to bring this back or to mend this. And I often am tasked going into a system to rebuild something, to amplify something, to diminish something. So I probably stayed as long as I could. They went through a tremendous amount of downsizing after that. And I'm not convinced they really returned to where they were. I was in the process of producing a documentary about their 135th anniversary when COVID came along. I'm a big proponent also of images and video. Those who are 30 and under, that's a great recruitment tool to use images and video, particularly when you have personal testimony of Dr. John or Sally Smith, and they're talking about the institution and what it's like to work there as a urologist or a psychiatrist or a rheumatologist or a family medicine doc. That goes a long way with helping someone who's 30, 31, who's just getting out of residency, and they go, well, this person really likes working here. So they went through a lot of changes all the way to the top. Needless to say, I think in healthcare that's more often the case than not. The system I'm with now, we're very stable financially. That's a real brand strength. We're not looking to be acquired or acquire anyone else. Nearly all of our growth is a vertical growth. So we're not looking for financial stability through merger and acquisition. That gives us a lot of stability. And again, I think it's a brand strength to offer to candidates that you don't have to worry about coming here within 2 years. We're going to be gobbled up by another system, and then everything changes organizationally because our organization is very nimble and flat as opposed to a hierarchy. And that's helpful when you're talking with candidates.
Yeah, you touched on a couple of important things there. I know, for the PracticeLink site, anytime you have video that you can add to those job postings, that they perform better. We can see that on our site, even down to making sure the recruiter section that you've got your picture there, your contact information. Just having the picture is substantial. People want that connection when they're reaching out to you. And I think I've used that in the past, that financial stability of the health system. It is very important. I think every day you see on Becker's or Modern Healthcare, it's either health systems doing layoffs or pivoting or having to be acquired in that scenario, that it's stressful for physicians just as it is any other employee. They have high mortgages and high incomes, and so it probably compounds for them. Plus, anytime you've gone into a place, you want to know that leadership is stable, that they're staying, because you go to work for a company, but it's also the people in those instances where you change out one of those and it maybe makes it a less desirable workplace.
Well, we spend so much time at work. I mean, we're going to perform better with people we are comfortable with, we can be transparent with, people we like. It's kind of difficult to succeed when the reverse is the case.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of talked about some change there that you went through, and how has what you've experienced throughout your career kind of guided and maybe set your leadership style, and maybe what principles that you might share that you use to guide and lead a team?
I would say very clear communication, making sure that everything is very clear. Again, back to Apple, one of their approaches to any customer problem is something they called what is the agreed upon problem or issue? What are we going to agree? What's the one single problem? And that can take a lot of time. I mean, you're chopping and dicing a lot of problems into smaller pieces. So I think that's one thing, being very, very clear about what you're supposed to do. I think sometimes we get together in a physical meeting or maybe a web call, and everyone doesn't necessarily understand what they are supposed to do or what the goal is. They're not clear. It should be something very simple, very clear. No one should walk away, well, what was I supposed to do? What's the goal here? If things are unclear, you're not going to succeed. So you have to be really, really clear. I'd say another thing I've learned over the years is very frequent communication with people. I prefer physically communicating with people. Most of the time, by the way, I sit in an office. I find that if I work remotely, I can end up working a little too much. It cuts into my evenings and weekends, and before you know it, I'm working 100 hours a week. So I try to put some self-imposed barriers so I'm not working excessively. That doesn't do anyone any good, including myself and also the organization I partner with. But being in the office, being clear with people, being simple, communicating clearly, frequently. I like to ask a lot of questions with people on various things. What did you learn? What's blocking you, or what's a barrier that you're facing? What's surprising you about this project? What's surprising you? What's something that you didn't anticipate that's popped out that you were not planning on? So you get a lot of feedback through that. Again, it doesn't have to be a 1 to 2 hour meeting. I remember back in the day when we used to have a lot of those. many 1 to 2 hour meetings several times per week, and then you come back to your office from a conference room, and then you have to get back into your workflow again, and that's tough. And being online, I think that has helped because you can talk with people virtually like we're doing today. So that also saves a lot of time because the time is already blocked rather than being open-ended. We're going to go in here. Sometimes it's necessary to meet face-to-face and just hash out a problem until you get a takeaway that's very clear and simple. Sometimes that's necessary, but gosh, we've all been through too many meetings where people's minds are wandering and they're doodling on their legal pad and all this sort of thing.
Meetings that could have been an email and emails that should be meetings. Yeah, I worked for someone that if we got to over like 5 kind of circling responses on an email, he'd say, time out. Let's just have a quick meeting, clear communication, setting expectations, just like you said, where there are several things. Hey, could you review this? If it's something from your marketing team or something, that doesn't need to be a meeting. Put it on the screen, look at it, give your feedback. But other things take some time to do that.
Do you want to know when to do what in your job search? First Practice, PracticeLink's resident and fellow career guide, teaches you 10 easy-to-follow steps every prospective physician needs to find their dream practice. And best of all, it's completely free at firstpractice.com. Becoming a physician is hard. Finding a job doesn't have to be. Thank you for listening. Now we'll return to the podcast.
So you talked a little bit about balancing your professional and your personal life and gave that, for you, it's being in the office. And I agree. When I first went remote, which was more than a decade ago, way before COVID, it was just super easy to walk into my office. I'd start work early if I was up before my kids, or I'd work late. And it is hard as a recruiter because that's when providers are available for you. They work like we do during the day. So when do you get them? Well, in the evenings or the early mornings. So it becomes hard to kind of block and tackle on your schedule to make sure you have time for projects or you have downtime. Any other tips or advice that you would give to folks about balancing that?
One thing that I've learned over the years, and this flows from Cal Newport, he's written a lot of books on how we work. He's become very popular over the last 5 to 6 years, and he is a proponent of digital minimalism. And this is something that my son, even though my son is an entrepreneur, he has a lot of vertical companies that he's begun, but he and I have talked about it a lot. In fact, he was the one who first introduced me to ChatGPT a few years ago. But he talks a lot about our relationship with the digital world, and that maybe, it sounds strange, but in maybe 10 or 15 years, people will have a very different relationship with digital devices than we have today. As he jokes, having a phone in your pocket will almost be like having maybe a pack of cigarettes. It will be looked upon like, why do you need a phone with you all the time? Because there's such a backlash now. There's a lot of people today who are maybe tweens, teens, early college. The New York Times did a piece about this a few years ago about a lot of teens today who are already rebelling against the digital world. And they're not necessarily nerds. They just have a flip phone. They have no apps. They don't text. They only have a phone to call their mom and dad. And the person interviewing these teenagers, they said, well, what do you do? And they said, well, we get together for coffee. We go to sporting events. We go skating. We go to movies. We go on a hike. Everything was real-time, face-to-face people. And I think they interviewed them while they were maybe at Rockefeller Center getting ready to ice skate. And rather than a smartphone, there's an underground push to have what's called a dumb phone, where there's no apps, you can't text. So kind of a reverse way back to 25 years ago, where people are just using a phone maybe to call people, rather than being tied so much to your phone and building relationships face-to-face. I say that because I joke with people that sometimes when folks enter an organization, they need to be given maybe an email license. They don't need to get email access maybe for 90 days. because not everyone can write a great email. And I think sometimes we get in this loop where we're only emailing people and we never talk with people over the phone. We never see people face to face. And I think I can write a good email. I could probably be better, but if I put my mind to it, it can be simple. It can be clear. Two big things for me, as we've heard. But there's a lot of emails, and I interact with people sometimes who that is their preferred method of communication. And if it is, that's fine. I try to find out when I'm beginning with leadership, do you want to talk on the phone? Do you want me to see you? Do you want me to text you? I can do either. I can text you at night. I can text you on the weekends. I can call you. I can email you. Probably email is my least favorite because it's not simple. It's not clear. One thing I do, sometimes I will change it up, and in the header, I will say information provided. So as soon as you see an email from me, you know Bruce is sending me some information. Or I will say action required in the header, in the subject line, so you know Bruce is asking me to do something before I even open the email, rather than you get 2-3 paragraphs down. I was at one organization, and this person, every email I received from her was always a page and 2/3, no matter what the subject was. And I'm thinking, she must have a lot of time to write this much. I'm on like the 9th paragraph, and she's finally getting to what she's asking us to do. And today, I mean, everything is so fast. Everything is such a blur at work that we really don't have time to go through that. But the more you get to know me, you see that simple and clear, those are two things that are guiding me a lot.
There was a recent study in the Netherlands, I think, with school children, and they gave up their smartphones for a certain amount of time. And then they really talked about those relationships and how they reconnected to the other students in the ways that you described. Yeah, I think people forget, unless you lived through flip phone or before those phones, and phones had a cord only at your house on the wall, where it is a little computer. And so, yes, it's great. You have the capability to do a lot from that little phone. But it's also bad that you can do so much from that. Like, go back to just a phone is a phone. And PracticeLink is a call first. We are very much a phone organization. We do still do that outreach to clients via phone. Now, whether or not people answer them anymore is kind of a weird thing. And maybe it's better text and then call. Like, even my parents, sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm right in the middle of something. I don't want to miss their call. But it's finding that like convenient time, asking your stakeholders, just like you said, that is key. Ask them what works for them. Do you like the instant message? Do you like the email? Do you want a meeting? Especially when you get to during the recruitment process, it's post-site visit, and you need to quickly gather everybody's feedback on that candidate. If somebody's like, I never read my email, you got to be texting them or, something else. And even your candidates, ask them, what's more convenient for you? If they're a surgeon and they're in the OR and they're super busy, you just have to ask and find what works for those communication methods. Yeah.
And for me, the benefit of a phone call is that it usually ends up being clear. You can swap 20 emails and it's easy to get confused. And then there's maybe ill motives assigned that should not be. People are reading in different emotions, and that's wrong. Just listen to the person's voice, see their expressions. You'll get a different takeaway than assuming ill motives.
At the beginning, you talked about being an AAPPR member and going through some of their educational pieces. So for me, it remains a very good networking opportunity to build those relationships like you talked about. So talk to me a little bit about how you value networking throughout your career journey, and then how you've built some of those relationships to benefit you.
I mean, networking is key. Of course, I know a lot of physician recruiters, north, south, east, west. Everyone has best practices. To me, the real benefit of being in AA double PR, that's what I call it. To me, it's just simple and clear, AA double PR. For me to be in that organization, just even my daily emails, I subscribe to the digest, so I've already looked at a few today and see what other people are wrestling with. If there's something that I can help someone. I remember about a year ago, someone was like, "Oh, I just become a physician recruiter. This is my second day. What do I do? How do I do this?" So I wrote her a simple and clear email about what I would do if I were her. So I think that's very helpful. I think that interaction maybe is, to me, more beneficial than maybe just webinars on a given subject. Just the daily interaction with people. Sometimes I'll email them. Sometimes I'll email everyone who's on the chain. Sometimes just offering my advice, ask them to call me, whatever. And also I've done the same with other areas as well. People in technology, getting their understanding, how they approach problems, how they recruit. I mean, of course, people in technology, their whole cycle of recruitment is very, very different than ours. I've had tech recruiters come and work for me, and they throw their hands up in a few days. It's like, this is crazy. You guys are on such a long cycle, which we are, and they're accustomed to screening someone. Do you have this? Can you code this? Can you do that? Are you familiar with this system? And then boom, they're hired. And with us, you're waiting on credentialing, licensure, privileging, so many other things, onboarding and orientation. So when they talk about a cycle, we talk to them about a cycle of 6 months to a year, they pull their hair out. It's like, this is too much.
Yeah, and I think that folks that have transitioned from other industries into physician recruitment especially, it is a long game. It is not quick. Even to find the candidates takes a lot longer than in some of those other spaces where you're recruiting.
And it's getting longer. I don't know if you were going to ask me this, but people say, what's it like today versus when you began? Even though with all of our tools, I think it's probably more difficult now than it's ever been. Because, primary care is a great example. Usually if you're good in either math and or science, you think about becoming a physician. And many of those folks today, they might go to medical school, but as soon as they complete medical school, rather than even attempting to maybe match for residency, they will go apply to a job to be a chief scientific officer or a chief medical officer at a startup in Silicon Valley. And of course, the compensation is very different. They get a lot of money, a lot of earning capacity, and also a lot of great benefits. They still retain the benefit of being an MD, but there's no clinical practice. There's nothing patient-facing. They're working on research projects for some health startup, Google Health or whatever. So that's what they're doing. And I see a lot of med students today, once they complete medical school, rather than attempting to match in residency, they go the tech route.
Yeah, I know several startup companies, even ones that we work with, a couple of guys, they went to med school and law school and then didn't come out and practice, which is crazy to me. I'm like, how much do you love school? And the debt, I think about how much student debt they have, but it is a unique skill set for those folks. And I would often tell my teams when we're recruiting these physicians and providers, especially physicians, but telehealth jobs are our big thing that we're competing against. Then locum tenens, because it gives them the flexibility and the income earning potential that they want. So we're way down the list of being the jobs people want because the nature of the schedules or the call or, just the clinic hours, where I try and impress upon people, the flexibility is a must right now because we're at the front end of that big gap in the shortage. When you look at the AAMC data, it's going to be worse in 5 years, 10 years even worse. And I always say I don't think that I will outlive the shortage. I hope it's better for my kids or we've got other mechanisms of care, but we are the front end of it being hard. Let's talk a little bit about your legacy. Now, I'm not saying you're leaving the industry anytime soon, but when you decide to do that and leave recruitment, how do you want to be remembered? Or is there anything professionally that you would highlight as something, key that you've done in your career?
I would say that I approached physician recruitment through brand equity, which is kind of another word for brand strength. Not every organization understands what a brand is. Again, they confuse it with logo, and that's because we see an apple and we think of Mac. We see two opposing interlocking C's and we think of Chanel. We see a swoosh and we think of Nike, and really Nike has very little to do with shoes. Their brand is something else. Same thing with Apple. The computers, that's kind of a sideline. But that's one way I would like to be remembered, that I did great work, that I did high quality, high integrity work, that I wasn't required, but, I voluntarily served as a mentor to my teammates and helping others out. As an example, maybe helping alleviate the fear of another teammate who's afraid to call Dr. Ricks and talk with her about an opportunity because she might be a little scared of talking with you over the phone and would just prefer an email to Dr. Ricks and see if Dr. Ricks responds, rather than calling you and talking with you about the neonatology opening that we have. So being a mentor like that in either an official or an unofficial way, helping people see things from a different way. There are things that are tried and true that we don't want to get away from. But on the other hand, there's different ways of approaching things. And that's where reverse mentoring can come into play. There are people who are 25 and 30 who they can approach things that I can learn from, and vice versa. So we all have to have that mindset that we're a learning organization. To me, when you're learning a lot every day, when I first went into physician recruitment, one of my leaders said, after you send an email, you make a phone call, you attend a meeting, you need to write down what you have learned. What are you learning? And if you're learning after each of those instances, that will serve a great role in enhancing your knowledge and your connection to candidates. I really didn't grasp it at the time. It took me a few years once I got away from it to understand what she was saying. You need to be learning in every instance, and that way you build your own knowledge base and enhance it. Those are a few things that I would like to leave as a legacy, that learning, mentoring, innovation, doing high quality work, meeting big challenges, and I guess in some sense when I leave, that people miss me. They miss the connection that they had with me every day. It's like, oh, I wish Bruce was here again. I worked at an organization like that once where when I left, people called me afterwards and said, gosh, we really miss you. We wish you were here. And it's good to be missed. So I want to do a good enough quality of work and connection with my teammates that I missed when I leave.
It's amazing. APPR, we talked about the networking opportunities there, and obviously LinkedIn just compounds on who and what industries and how you can connect there. Today I was texting with several people, some that used to work with me, some that we interacted in different committees or just time along the way in my career. And it's a great feeling to either be missed or to know you had that impact on others in their career journey. I always think about, could we have the opportunity to work again with someone? And so making sure the doors are open and you've had those conversations where in that instance, you have a position open or you hear of a position opening, you've got somebody you would refer based on just your history together and potentially their work that you've done. So you mentioned mentors quite a bit. Has there been anybody who's had a significant influence on your career? I know you've mentioned some really big people, Silicon Valley people, but what about people maybe closer to you or within your same either industry or that, personally had that influence?
Every organization I've been in, every organization I've served in, I've learned from people, whether senior or junior to me. When I enter an organization, I'm not necessarily looking for a title. I'm just looking to go in and do good work and be helpful. There have been junior people There have been senior people just day in and day out. So much of the foundation to my thinking was set when I first entered physician recruitment. I had the benefit of having people who were very committed to English grammar and usage. So when I'm writing an email, yes, I love Grammarly. I use it a lot, personally and professionally. But, making sure that things are clear and that there's good usage so everyone has a clear takeaway. But that was early on. I remember she saying something like, well, what's your opinion of this? And I'm like, well, I've been here 2 or 3 weeks. Why should I have an opinion? She goes, no, you're getting paid to have an opinion. I may disagree with you. You may be wrong, but I want to hear your opinion. And she had been doing physician recruitment for a long time, and I thought, wow, that's a good point. So she would say, well, what's your opinion about this? What's your judgment? I think that's a good model to follow, to make sure that other people can voice their opinions and that you listen to them, because we're not omniscient. We don't know everything there is to know about everything. So there are people who are senior or maybe junior, and they can give us their opinions. They're like, wow, I never thought of that. So we need to be listening a lot. The challenge is there's so much noise in the workspace today. Not literal, but figurative noise. We get so many emails, so many calendar invitations, so many webinars, so many things to do. Physical events, residency fairs. So much is hitting us. There's so much noise, and it's like we can't see the lighthouse through the fog. I want to see the lighthouse, but there's just so much fog every day.
And I think having been a mentor and serving as mentor for folks, but then being a mentee, helping cut through some of that fog and the noise, these are the people you bring those types of conversations to. It's great you had those leaders who understood the value of different perspectives. It's never just one way to get to the solution, and working on it together is a great way to do that. Well, Bruce, it's been a pleasure. Anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap up?
I'm a big advocate of LinkedIn. I jumped on LinkedIn back in the day when it was very, very basic. And it has been helpful to me in recruiting physicians. I network with a lot of people. I do a lot of reposting from Becker's. By the way, Becker's is a real useful tool for me. I get a lot of really great trends. Modern healthcare, same thing. But yeah, I would say to any physician recruiter, don't neglect LinkedIn. It's a great way to learn. I continue every day to learn a lot through LinkedIn.
We're seeing trends of the next workforce coming through. They do like using it on a professional basis because it's where they can talk about their publications or some of the work that they've been doing in medical school and then onward into residency. So we do see it becoming more and more impactful in our specific niche of physician provider recruitment. So on behalf of PracticeLink, I want to thank you, Bruce, for appearing on Workforce Wisdom today. For our listeners, please feel free to reach out with any insights or questions you have about anything we covered today. You can email plmedia@practicelink.com. If you're looking for provider career opportunities, check our website at practicelink.com. My name is Christy Bray. Thank you for listening.